Today's episode is brought to you by the end of the Overwatch League 2020 season.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I am your host, The Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, my man. What a weekend we just had.
Woo! Arguably, yeah.
That was an event, to say the least.
Absolutely.
We'll be getting into the details of it throughout the episode, but yeah, I was even surprised how little I was like bummed or affected by the timing of it. I didn't let myself dwell on it going into it, but at the same time, like, to know me is to know that I sleep for 14 to 16 hours at a time on weekends because I get like 3.5 hours of sleep all week during the week.
You make up for it.
And I make up for it. So like, to me, it was like near impossible to have any hope of catching that stuff. Like what I would have needed to do to my sleep schedule would have been so drastic that it just didn't make any sense. But I was just able to, wake up and go to the broadcast and put my hand over the top of it and then, send it to my TV and rewind. And I was good to go. I usually did wake up with the broadcast still ongoing. One of the days I was completely after the fact, but overall it was just a phenomenal event. How about you? Were you bummed about the time? How did it mess with you? I know you were ahead of me at all times watching.
I was. So I basically woke up and then was watching essentially during work or like I guess it was, I'm trying to think. No, yeah, one of the days I was. Yeah, I like, it was fine. One thing that they did well was on the actual YouTube page, they had like spoiler like in the title so that it would like prevent you from getting spoiled essentially.
Yeah, but the thumbnail still had the two teams.
Right. Like I think like either do it all the way or I guess just don't try to do it at all, because like if you give me the thought that like I might be safe going to the page, like what they should have done was, and maybe they can think about the formatting for this for next season, is have like a tab, like I don't know, because like if you go to the Overwatch League homepage, like I'd like there to be like either like a pop-up that's like, do you want to, are you caught up? And then if you say no, you can go to like a spoiler-free page and like go to whatever match you want and like have it be like 100% like hands washed, like hazmat suit on, spoiler-free zone that you can go to and have it be, overwatchleague.com/not caught up, or they can come up with a better name than that. But like have a place to go, because like obviously we've been spoiled.
Yes, we have been.
We've been spoiled being in the U.S. and having the games be centered around us, and then also being physically at the games. But now that we've experienced it on the other end, like set up a place to like youtube.com/overwatch, like have a playlist. I don't know. I don't know if you can do it with YouTube because they have to fit within the confines of their own of YouTube's page. But considering the size of that deal, like
one thing I will say, YouTube video thumbnails are editable after the video's live. You don't have to define one and then stick with it forever. In fact, I change mine when I don't like the performance of a video.
Sure.
I talk to some people and it can have a significant impact on video performance. And maybe that's really part of the problem, is they're trying to like get the correct video, performance by having the good thumbnail up there from the beginning. But at least for like some amount of leeway or overlap time or something. But maybe that's the thing to do, is a hub on the website, downplay how important the YouTube pages, at least for that event in that
Right.
circumstance, because this is a problem that's never going away, right? It'll just not
Right.
affect individuals some years, or more so some years than other years,
Right.
etc. Because it's a global league, right? Like
Right.
they can put it in Europe and it's going to have a unique set of time constraints and schedules that'll impact different
Right.
people in different ways. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely an area. It's And first of all, it's phenomenal that this is like where all of my complaints on the weekend are coming from.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so great job to them. I loved the whole feel of the broadcast, everything down to the virtual stage that they were
Yeah, I
on.
wanted to talk about that actually.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's get
Well,
it started.
I thought it was an interesting it was cool, like the fact that you had, like, you know, it made you feel like they were at a desk. The one thing I didn't like, that I thought was a little awkward, was like they clearly told the talent to, like, oh, look over, like you're actually looking at the person that's not actually there. And like that was a little bit like, I get what they're going for, but like I don't think it really you gained anything by doing that. Like when Zoe's like talking and like looking up, like she would be looking at Reinforce, but actually he's over here. Like it's just a little awkward. A very small thing. Like you can kind of take that back. Like we get it. You're not actually
Sure.
you're not actually there. You
I
don't need to go that far into it.
I guess that makes sense. I really didn't analyze or concern myself with that aspect of it all, which to me says, A, they did a really good job of it if I didn't notice it.
Yeah.
And B, I low-key just kind of thought they were in like a temporary recording studio, that maybe just like that the three of them were
Oh,
together, but like in their own separate little recording booths. So it didn't look good on camera to like show them side
if
by
that's the
side
case, then
and
I would
encased
get
in their
that.
soundproof booths or whatever.
That's possible,
Um,
actually.
so that I thought when they looked, they actually were looking over at one another. But
That is
then there's the
possible.
question of where was Zoe, right? Because she was back in Sweden, Switzerland. I don't remember. Sorry, Zoe.
Yeah.
But she was back home, and then but presumably like she couldn't work when she was there, but then she did a little bit. She like found a connection, so maybe she was still just back home and just had stable enough internet to work. I really don't know. But either way, I thought they did a really, really good job. The
Yeah.
only thing that I thought was missing, and let's be honest, I was in VODs. I was skipping around some of the actual broadcast
Right.
stuff because it's so stressful when you're behind, right? You're like, oh, my phone went off. Is it the Discord channel?
Right.
Somebody posts something in the memes
Right.
channel in the Discord that's going to ruin this match for me. So like I would skip over some of that stuff, and every shot that had Jake's like ascot or bandana or whatever the heck he was wearing, I had to skip right over that. But yeah, so I mean, it was just like a lot of skipping around for me.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did watch of that kind of aspect of it, I don't know. I just thought they did a really good job of it. The only thing I wanted more of was Golden Boy, and maybe I missed some of the MC stuff, but most of what I saw was like the guess the map, and like I wanted Golden Boy. Like you had the screens for the player cams, turn them on one at a time. I wanted Golden Boy calling out the names. And then I wanted Striker flexing in the camera when it's turned on. I wanted virtual walkouts in its own way, and I thought there could have maybe been a little more with that. But and then how do you do that with Golden Boy not being there? Do you superimpose him onto it with a green screen? And there's no way that looks right all the time. Might look okay most of the time, but
I don't know. Dr. Disrespect can do it pretty well.
True.
Like, he's got him riding in the Lamborghini down to a T. Like the Overwatch League team should be able to do it. Like,
Fair enough.
I've thought that he was in the locker room multiple times. To me, it felt like Golden Boy was 100% pre-recorded to me. That's what it felt like. So like he probably wasn't able to be there at all. So like it was 100%. Like we've got the Golden Boy was essentially just bumpers to the event, which is kind of lame, but also like,
it's better than no Golden Boy.
Yeah, 100%.
But because I love and miss that man on the broadcast regularly. But listen, those are our complaints.
Little nitpicky things,
insignificant, and nonsensical they are to the overall grand scope of things. So why don't we push in and talk about some actual on stage, on fake stage match specifics here.
Yeah, let's get into it.
It's tournament talk.
So we started off the grand finals with a preview of the grand finals. Seoul Dynasty versus San Francisco Shock. San Francisco, of course, took that one down 3-2. And yes, it's easy to look back and say, oh, well, this was the precursor to what would eventually be the grand final match. But I mean, this at the time, this set a precedent. This really, like, hey, Seoul is legit. Yeah, they were I believe the lowest seed or the worst record coming into worst regular season record coming into the event, but like
By far. Yep.
Yeah, by far. But I mean, Death, we've said it before, like regular season, yeah, that's great. That's fine. If you want to look at like the spread of like overtime, which team was statistically the best, yeah, okay, cool. Get your honorary medal for that. That's irrelevant when it comes to playoffs. When it comes to the grand finals, it's like Seoul came to show up, and I mean, this was kind of what, you know, if you're a San Francisco fan or any one of these other fans besides Seoul, that's what you're afraid of, is when you see the ugly duckling turn into the beautiful swan, when you see the upstart, when you see the dark horse running towards you. That's scary. It's not yes, the dominant team is going to be scary, but you already know that that's coming. Like that is that's
you know
not
what you're getting from them when you line up across from them.
Exactly.
Seoul represented a level up, an unknown,
wild card,
something to fear. Yeah, a true wild card in this scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and that has proven to be the Achilles heel of a lot of elite teams in other sports. I know there was a stretch in the NFL where the 6th seed was like, I mean, it's where you wanted to be, right? Sure, you had to play an extra game. Sure, every single one of your games was on the road, but last 3 years, the 6 seeds showing up in the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
whether they wanted, I don't think they were in like a Super Bowl winning scenario, but yeah, it was like 6 seeds had made it a few years running.
Yeah.
And, it got some attention, and yeah, we talk about it every year in the season. And I talked about it a lot with Philly going into it, and I'll put a pin in that rant for a minute. But you know, it's not about, is it right to bench Carpe for Hisu in week 14? It's about getting Hisu ready, so that way if you need him in the grand finals, that he's there, right? Because that's when it's important to be playing at your best. When the postseason gets there and it's lose and go home, that's when you need to be at your absolute best. And Seoul showed that, as they already had, to be honest, previously.
Mm-hmm.
At least a handful of that roster had when they won with London in season 1. So yeah, it was a great tournament, obviously, for them. But why don't we go day by day here through the results and go from there? So what was it? Just the first 2 in day 1?
I believe so. So the other match was Shanghai beating Philadelphia 3-0.
Yeah. Let's keep a pin in it. Let's keep going.
Okay, so of course that means our losers bracket is going to be Seoul versus Philly, and Philly, you know, they didn't decide to put up a win in this event. They did not get anything. 3-0 for Seoul.
Let's go ahead and take that pin out, and let's talk about the Philadelphia Fusion. Man, Philly fans, I'm gonna ask you to earmuffs. Honestly, I was a little heated after they were out and after they were done. They showed so much promise. They leveled up so much, and we talked and we did the preview episodes, and we gave them every benefit of the doubt. You are what your record says you are. You know, their performance in the actual postseason prior to the grand finals was fine. This was the same patch.
Pretty good.
Yeah, they did very well. I mean, they
ended the Washington
seed.
Right. They ended the Washington reign of injustice, right?
Yeah,
if I recall correctly, yeah.
And so they looked like they had a plan for the meta. It was very dive based. I thought that really fit what they were doing, and what their roster wanted to be. I thought that put Sato in the best opportunity to succeed. and then they show up, and if my memory serves, against Shanghai, they played Sato the whole time, and they went to the Roadhog compositions, and it just didn't work for them. And now, in their defense, everybody went to the Roadhog compositions. So my main beef is that they didn't do it in the main postseason. It just felt so backwards to me that, hey, all the best teams are playing dive, and all the bottom tier latchers on, the hangers on, the hopefuls, switched to the Roadhog because it was a little overtuned in the numbers department, but it really just looked like, I mean, since every single one of the best teams and every single team that qualified except for the Seoul Dynasty, every single one of them was playing dive. So in what universe is dive not the correct composition to run? I don't understand. Hey, so we've got to play against all these bad teams, and they're playing against the thing that we think is correct, but we're not going to play it because we're afraid that if we mirror match the bad teams, we're going to lose to them. So we're going to play a suboptimal composition because we play it a little better. We've been practicing it for, I don't know, you've been in hero pools forever. If you think you've been practicing one thing for how long, I don't know what you were paying attention to. So they, like, every single one of these teams handcuff themselves and handicap themselves to play a worse composition through the postseason. I just didn't get, and didn't they have a month or something? Like, there was a break after the regular season ended. I heard all the talk about it was going to be, we were going into the Roadhog, and I gave the teams the benefit of the doubt. And I kind of, my analysis, my everything was really centered around, it's going to be dive based because logically that was the only way for it to go. Like, all the teams that saw success playing dive. Sure, maybe some maps here or there, they dabbled into the Roadhog, the high ground's not super important, whatever it was. There was times San Francisco switched to it a little bit to beat Washington. Stuff like that. But, mirror matching somebody when you're losing and then being better than them, that's exactly what I'm outlining, right? Like, so there was no reason to me that they were off of what they thought was the best composition. I don't know what would have happened throughout the course of the event that would have made them change their mind, considering all the dive teams were the ones that won out, obviously, except for Seoul. And I really think that was a big contributing factor to what happened here with the Philadelphia Fusion, is they then had to switch to this composition that didn't suit them quite as well. And by had to, I mean, they 100% chose to. I don't think they were by any means obligated, or, not even in the sense of rules, but just in terms of performance, looking at it, it was absolutely a voluntary choice to do that. They did it in a way nobody else did it, and that was to bench their main tank player. Everybody else had their main tank player play the Roadhog. And I think the reason for that is the Roadhog in those compositions functions very similar to how a main tank functions. He just has a big fat belly instead of a big fat shield. So you're still playing around a lot of natural cover, and I think that's what you saw a lot of the other main, that's how you saw Stand 1 do it, that's how you saw Super do it, that's how you saw Smurf do it, because they did play, San Francisco did play both main tanks a little bit. But Philly can't play Sato in that spot. And I'm sorry, but I talked about it going into it. If there's a weakness on the Philadelphia roster, it was Sato. And listen, there's going to be some negativity surrounding Sato coming up. And I want to preface it by saying, this is not me repeating what I said last year and saying it's the same thing. This is a very different conversation. This is a conversation where Sato's established himself as a viable, bare minimum league, average in the league main tank player, something that last year I would have never put him in that category. I wouldn't have thought it possible. He's proven me wrong already. Now we're talking about Sato on a championship contender that goes to grand finals. And I thought in every single matchup, there was a main tank difference in those Philadelphia Fusion lineups when, yes, he still had the best support line in the world there trying to bail him out. But he was less valuable as a flanker playing ball than Gesture was on Roadhog. And that, granted, Roadhog can flank, and that was definitely the style Gesture wanted to play, but that's 100% of what the Wrecking Ball does. He was completely invalidated on any role that was even remotely outside of Winston or Reinhardt to the point where they couldn't play him on it, and he didn't. I don't think maybe map one, but otherwise didn't touch the stage for Philly against Seoul in the losers bracket there. And it was a little bit what I said. He was going to be out of his depth when you separate all of the Bostons and the Washingtons and the Houstons, and go to the other region if you want to, the Chengdus, the Hangzhous, the teams that just lacked, that weren't able to really regularly compete with the top teams. Once it became a battle of elite versus elite and the best versus the best, Philly was able to be exposed, starting with the tank position.
Yep.
Now, Philly also completely harshed themselves. I have railed endlessly about this particular roster choice, the choice to decide in grand finals when your whole season's on the line, that your best, most clutch, absolutely dominant MVP nominee on the DPS category, your Widowmaker All-Star that's done things on the hero that we wouldn't believe possible had we not seen Carpe do them, to decide that suddenly Jesus, your Widowmaker player, is a travesty. It is borderline locking Farah in your playoff match against the Boston Uprising with no backup plan. I said it on Twitter. They absolutely harshed themselves. They just shot themselves in the foot. The coaching staff, I'm appalled we gave the man coach of the year after that decision right there alone. Listen, making do, acknowledging finally that maybe Sato's not the best main tank in the world and there's a better option for you. Better late than never, I guess, right? So that's not, I guess, too big of a strike on the coaching staff. If he can't play the hog, he can't play the hog. But if he's as good of an Overwatch player, if he's as good of a tank player as we've been sold by the coaching staff, by all the talk about how the team loves him, the team believes in him, well, you know what? Their job's not general manager. Their job's not talent scout. Their job's not head coach. Let your players play, let your coaches coach. And so they take him out. They take Carpe out, and they were just lost. I mean, they didn't have the clutch ability anymore. Hisu didn't even play poorly. The team just played poorly. They just felt and looked so unprepared to stand on that stage against the best teams in the league. And I was glad I found it before last episode, because it really made up my mind that I didn't have Philly as a serious finals participant contender in my mind, because they just constantly failed against the elite teams when they got the chance. They were like 1-4 against San Francisco, but they lost to Paris when Paris was on the up because the meta really suited them. Like, they would lose to the teams that popped up and were elite in specific metas, even if not across the board as well. And it just,
they're the gatekeeper always.
And they just
the
never
door's always
actually
open.
belonged. They were just propped up by the fact that, especially at the beginning of the year, how many times did they play against Houston? How bad was Houston at the beginning of the year? How many times did they play against Boston? How many times did they play against Washington? Those were the teams that were in the immediate, well, maybe not Houston, but those are the teams Houston didn't, like, I think they were pushed into the East Coast group. Anyways, leave them out because they even got better over the year, and I don't know that they fall into the, like, they were the anti-clutch team, but they were good anyways. At times, anyway, this isn't about that, but they were just locked into matchups against like the Bostons and the Washingtons and the bad teams so often that it really inflated their record.
And just made them look good.
And if the regions were together, I don't think they would have had the number 2 seed overall. I think they would have been tested more than enough, especially after seeing this weekend play out and what exactly playing against elite competition with stakes did to them. It just really, really demolished them. Like, it was a rough outing. So my heart goes out to you, Philly fans. I've certainly been there in my sporting career as a fan, rooting for a team that looked good, and then when it mattered, just didn't show up. But man, they really need to look at things and listen. If they're okay being a team that makes it into the playoffs and never actually accomplishes anything, then I think they're fine where they are. But we're right back to where we were last year with this roster. If they're just going to keep Sato and they're just going to keep subbing Carpe out for average to above average replacement level players
Mhm.
from their bench. There's a fundamental philosophical problem in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
One that doesn't stop them from winning in the regular season. It doesn't stop them from being considered a good team, but it stops them from being more than a footnote, more than an afterthought. And
Right.
it's going to keep them from being an actual legitimate championship contender. It's funny too, because I kind of went on Twitter, and like I said, I was hot after the first 2 days. It was funny, and that's how good the matchups were. That
Yeah.
like they got my blood going, and it's a very good thing that my reaction was that way. But all the other things we were sold, like Shanghai's the best team in the league, and it's not close.
Right.
Where did that show up? Or
Right.
Korea's better than NA. Sorry, but like that's not how it played out. And you can't keep repeating this refrain over and over again for narrative's sake just to have it blow up. Like you got to have something to base it off of. And
Right.
thankfully, I think that's a problem that goes away. We're not going to be separated by regions probably ever again. I mean, who knows how long the COVID crisis lasts? Maybe we start the year that way next year. Hopefully
Right.
not. But, you'll always have the common opponent metric to look at when the league's all together. You'll always have the heads up matchups against everybody by the end of the regular season, that everybody plays everybody at least once, I think. So there'll be some actual legitimate measuring sticks. So I don't mean to like put anybody specifically on blast for saying Shanghai was the best team. There was reasons to think it. I watched them play too, but to say it with certainty and as many times as was said,
Right.
at the end, for it to just fall so completely short, and to be told, I mean, God, Frito's posted on Twitter once about how Sato might not be an elite main tank, and like got blasted. I mean, just people were furious.
Right.
And like did you look? Because at no point did I think his performance was there, and then to see on the big stage it line up and they're taking him out, and like it's just everything was so narrative driven this season, and almost by necessity, because you didn't have 3 elite teams in any region,
Mhm.
right? Like New York could have gotten there and then given Asia 3 of them with Guangzhou on the up, but it never materialized. So it was always a battle of 2. It felt like, with an occasional surprise here or there, but like I don't know. I didn't see a lot of people predicting San Francisco going into this weekend, and especially with the benefit of hindsight and how perfect that is. It is, man, what an insult to the defending champs,
Right.
That like got the 1 seed out of their region,
Yeah.
and came in and had done it before. Like how did people doubt that? How did people doubt Krusty and the coaching staff and
Yeah.
the roster that had proven it and done it and never really fallen off? I mean, sure, there was some metas that looked like it didn't perfectly suit them, but never one where they did poorly or
Yeah.
anything.
Then they
like
were
that.
down to A+ tier and not S+ tier. Like,
Yeah. And it's just crazy to me that we let ourselves get carried away by the fact that the regions were separated, and we let the fact that like there's a lot of Korean players playing on the NA side of things make us
Oh.
really believe that the teams were so much better
Yeah.
over there. And like it's just that everything's been integrated. Like it's not that way anymore.
Right.
And physically where their cities are located isn't going to make much of a difference. It's going to
Right.
come down to talent on the roster and coaching, not the region you play in or the division you're in.
Yeah.
It's going to come down to that. And the sooner, and you'll never completely shed narratives. They're too valuable to broadcast. They're too appealing to
yeah.
fans. But we should also be able to recognize, I think, when they're being fed to us and forced fed to us. And that's really what it felt like.
Well,
Again, with the benefit of hindsight.
yeah. Well, here's the thing about narratives is that they're great and everything you said about them is true. But the thing is, the fact of the matter is that you have to throw them away when they're not good anymore, right? Like when fact and what has and results spits in the face of narrative, you have to throw it out. Like You can't be talking in the San Francisco versus Seoul Grand Finals about how Shanghai could have been 0 to hero, right? Like that's just that, you know, there's no reason to talk about that anymore. And what was interesting was that even after San Francisco wins, there's still the talk about how the Asia region was better, and like maybe that's true if you like you can make that argument if you want to, you know, change what metrics you're looking at. Sure, if you want to look at like pound for pound, yeah, there's fewer teams and those teams are better. Like those teams as a whole are better if you're factoring in all of the NA region teams. Sure, I mean Boston and Toronto and Houston at times are going to throw that off. Sure, congratulations. The thing about it, and the thing about picking your narratives and what you should be pushing and talking about is like that's not a relevant thing to talk about. Who cares? But what does it matter if NA is better or the Asia region is better? What matters is who is hoisting the trophy at the end of the season. The regions being different is an irrelevant thing. There's no like that's not what the season is about. That's not what any season has ever been about. It's for any sport for that matter. Like, yeah, maybe the AFC East, or I'm making stuff up. I don't know. Maybe, this region or that region is better or stacked. I know that the AL East in baseball for years was always way better, and like you could have like a suboptimal record in the National League and make it to the playoffs and end up facing against teams that had way better records, in the World Series or something like that. It doesn't matter what region was better or not. It matters what team was better in this game or not. And yes, you can talk about the narratives and you can talk about how, maybe Asia was stronger. It's irrelevant. It does not matter because San Francisco, at the end of the day, takes it down. They beat Shanghai. They beat Seoul. They beat both of the teams that came here, that came into the finals from that region, and they end up being the best. So can you make the argument that the Asia region is stronger? Sure. But is that relevant? Absolutely not.
It's just kind of a stupid argument. Because if you're not talking about the top end of the region, then what are you bothering to talk about? And that to me is what it comes down to, because you're right that Asia didn't have a Boston. It didn't have a Washington. It didn't have those bottom end teams, but it also might have, had they not been separated, because when you're one of those bottom end teams and you're forced to play against the same opponent over and over and over again, you learn the opponent. You're not a better team, but you're better against that opponent because of your experience in facing them. And that gives you the opportunity to maybe earn some upsets that Boston didn't have the chance to earn because they were spread out playing against, 14 teams, or I can't remember how exactly it was broken up. And it's too funny to me. You mentioned people kind of clinging to the narratives after the fact and still trying to justify them. And I'm just going to call it out directly because why not? But like Yiska commented on my hot Twitter post about it, and with just like with the coldest take I've ever seen. 3 playoff matches isn't a good indicator of overall regional strength. It's like, what are you talking about? The only time we see a team from NA play against a team from APAC, we can't use those. Those are the ones we can't use. We've got to go back and look at when NA played against NA 400 times and Korea played against Korea 600 times. That's ridiculous. It doesn't stop clinging to the narrative when you're wrong about it. You have to throw it away and disregard it. We cling to narratives too. And then I rail about narratives in the next 5 minutes of the episode. But like it's about, everybody uses them. Everybody clings to them. You formulate them in your own mind. And when they're in your own mind and it's your opinion, you don't think of it as a narrative. And I think that's where it really comes up. But you have to be willing to like throw it out when it's just proven wrong. And even in the short term, I mean, we can use these matchups to determine who the champion of the league is, but to use it to point to regional strength doesn't make any sense. Like, come on.
Well,
what are we talking
about? I also think that regional strength is just an irrelevant thing to be talking about.
It was always stupid, but you had to talk about it because they were split.
Well, yeah. But Kind of, but also like the regional strength argument is irrelevant when yeah,
There's
I
a
don't want to
reason
beat a
we
dead
didn't
horse.
focus on it because
I
we
don't
didn't
right.
think it was a valuable
And
use of airtime.
I don't want to beat a dead horse because obviously NA greater than Asia because NA has the trophy. GG. But here the last thing I'll say about it is I think, and I think we are still, and by we I mean esports content creators and just esports fans in general are still very new to the sports narrative in general, right? As a community as a whole, we're still very new, and because it's not just oh well we need to get to the place that traditional sports are. In some ways we do, but it's also like we are growing the same way, or we're growing like traditional sports did 100 years ago, but we're growing in very different ways. So we're not always going to reach the same conclusions. But I do think we're going to reach a lot of the same conclusions and get to a lot of the same spots. It's just you're not sure where you're going to end up. So I think
when we get there, I'll still be whining about narratives.
Well, sure.
There's one in football now, and it's that Kirk Cousins is like terrible or anti-clutch in prime time, right? Like he's got no clutch ability, and like last night, I watched a football game in primetime. He goes down 3 minutes left on the clock, scores a touchdown to put his team ahead. And then like they go for it on a 4th down and they call a run play. And now the run play doesn't work and the other team goes down and scores on them. So like, because they failed on a run play, because the coach didn't kick a field goal, and because the other quarterback, like how is that Minnesota's quarterback's fault that Seattle's quarterback won the game? Like
people don't think is the thing when they're doing that, which is part of the reason why they're bad. But I think the notion lives in esports more so than in traditional sports that they want the underdog to win. And I think it has something to do endemically with gamers and, being the underdog and not being and like hating the winner. Like, I think there's some nascent amount of that where it's like, oh, I think that's why people rallied around Shanghai so much. Do you think, like, look at the Cleveland Browns, for instance, right? They
4-1 Cleveland Browns. I see you, Thornrain. I'll give you credit when you deserve it.
But what was it? 2 seasons ago, they went 0-13 or whatever. They didn't win a game.
2 or 3 seasons ago, something like that.
Some number of seasons ago, didn't win a game. Same percentage record as the Shanghai Dragons. Were people were people lauding them, and were people brought to tears when the Cleveland Browns won their first game the season after that? I'm imagining very few people were, if any, probably not anyone. And yes, Thornrain probably was. And yes, I know different scenarios. That it was the first win in franchise history. I get that, but I think that there is a clinging on to the underdog in esports, inherently more so than in traditional sports, and that's okay. But what you need to learn to do is value that for what it is, not inherently grasp onto it and say, oh, well, they're the champions, but guess what? They haven't played against Shanghai, and Shanghai and Seoul are better because they're in the better region. But then when San Francisco win, like, what could possibly, like, were these playoffs? Okay, I'm done. I'm not beating a dead horse anymore. I'm going back in and getting upset about it. So
I know I could do hours.
I keep So I'm gonna end it there. Let us know what you think in the comment section below or in the Discord, discord.me/highnoonpodcast, because I think it's interesting, and I think you really gotta take a look in the mirror and see, is that what you're doing, and is it valuable? Are you talking about things that are relevant? But okay, so we kind of skipped over some of the matches all quick.
We're in the middle of 2 segments right now, so read the rest of tournament talk.
Yes,
and then we'll just go into break it down.
Yeah. Okay. So, we saw Seoul beat Philly 3-0. Then on the winner's side, San Francisco beat Shanghai 3-2. Then the losers finals goes into Seoul beating Shanghai 3-2, and then the grand finals, San Francisco takes out Seoul 4-2. And there are our grand finals champions, who apparently aren't good at. Okay, I'm not doing it again. I'm not reopening that wound.
All right, so we covered the Philly meltdown.
Yes, we did.
Let's talk about, and we did kind of touch a little bit on the Shanghai disappointment, but I do want to talk and discuss a little bit about maybe what happened. Is obviously this is a different caliber of letdown than Philly was. They lost to the eventual champs.
Yep.
Which is always understandable.
Sure.
And then they lost to the Seoul Dynasty, who were the hot team.
Mm-hmm.
This was, I think, the way the meta developed. This is a little bit a similar case to me with Philly. And like, why did you leave Dive?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you take Fearless, one of your best players throughout the season, off the field, off the stage, and put him on the bench in favor of Stand One just because his Roadhog was better, when you proved you didn't need Roadhog to beat other Roadhog compositions throughout an entire playoff?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that factors into it, but let's say you're on board with everybody switching to Roadhog and think that's correct. I think that did leave them a little bit underclassed in the main tank department, similar to what it did to Philadelphia. Stand One was solid. He looked pretty good, but I think he was maybe the fourth best of 5 qualifying Roadhog players in the tournaments. San Francisco played with 2 of them. Gesture was probably the best of them. I thought his performance was absolutely outstanding, and I think that in the 3-2 close matchup, I would give Gesture the nod, and the main tank difference is the reason why they were able to close out the losers bracket side of things with that 3-2 win there. I thought Shanghai also did a lot that was really, really strong. I really liked their decision to go to DM. I talked a lot throughout the season about like, where is DM? Where is Ding? You had one of the best DPS duos. I want to see those guys, and I want to see them integrate with the new additional talent of Fleta and Lip. And I thought DM performed very, very well in the matchups that he had. I thought they benched Fleta. They benched their MVP at times. And from performance, from what I saw, this wasn't a Philly situation, because as good as Fleta is, he doesn't have that inherent clutch factor that we talk about with Carpe and Profit, and maybe I'm underrating it a little bit, but there didn't seem to be any drop off when Lip came in to play Hanzo. He was lights out on the hero. So I thought those swaps were spot on. Again, if I'm making comp critiques or have any issues there, it's going to the Roadhog style instead of the Dive. It's none of the individual player stuff that they did. So yeah, really hard to discount. I think the constant refrain I had with this team, and really why I didn't pick them, you really saw them collapse in big moments again. Their inability to be clutch really reared its head, and it happens only in these super, super high stakes moments. But I really thought that was a defining reason why they lost. And there was a Shang 9 there. It was early on in the Seoul match. It certainly happened. I think they may have won the map anyways, so it was okay. It was one of the Koth rounds. But you could see it. And Li Jiagon, for as phenomenal as he's been all year long, and how Alarm's presence really robbed that man of a Rookie of the Year award. Man, he was feeding for a little bit there. Like, he just was so aggressive, and he'd jump onto high ground as Lucio and like try to 1v6 the Seoul Dynasty, and it just pretty regularly got him beaten up. And then he also managed to flip a switch, and it wasn't a problem later. And maybe it was going to the Mercy, but he was like, he was aggressive there. I mean, it's his style. It's great, but it's got to be calculated. It's got to be an intelligent aggression. You've got to pick your spots to be aggressive. And maybe the start of a Koth round with 6 people standing on the high ground and your team on the low ground is the wrong time to be super aggressive and go for the big play. And that was something that did fix itself over time, but I mean, early mistakes add up, and early mistakes give a team like Seoul momentum and confidence and the ability to really get in their own head about it, right? Like, when you're a 12-12 team going to the grand finals, you've got part of you's got to be like, we're outmatched. What are we doing? Like, this isn't going to work. Like, even if you're not saying it, or even if you don't really, there's some small part of you that has that. It's what I talked about with San Francisco. Like, how does a team beat them? attack them early. You've got to get them on the ropes. You've got to get them second guessing themselves. And I do think Shanghai, with some of their early mistakes, allowed Seoul to get in that headspace where we're going to win this one. This is ours to take down. So yeah, I don't know. What did you think about Shanghai overall performance here?
I think look at who they lost to. I mean, yes, it was a disappointment if you're coming in as a Shanghai fan, because they were certainly billed to be a grand final contender, if not favored. Again, I'm not opening that can of worms again, but certainly a popular pick for a favorite. Look at who they lost to. San Francisco, again, reigning champions right now. They've been at the top of the Overwatch League for a long time now. And then Seoul Dynasty, which, again, record being a little wonky. And you talked extensively about that, but notably, Death, have a handful of former champions on the team as well. And we've talked about it. We talked about it before. Like, yes, you're not on a stage physically, but you are in a very, very high pressure scenario. More so than anyone that Shanghai has been in thus far, right? You're at the highest level of Overwatch possible. Seoul at least has a core that's been there. San Francisco literally was there last year and dominated. So some of those nerves, like, you're getting rid of some of it. And, like, if it doesn't need to be a complete and utter explosion, like Philly not winning a single map, it can be a little thing here, a Shang 9 at the beginning, a flip of a map that could have been a W, a little thing here that is caught and maybe is corrected throughout the course. But, like, look at they lost 3-2 both times, right? You flip one of those maps, you flip 2 maps total, and they're all of a sudden in the championship, or actually winning the I mean, depending on what you do, but, like, could be potentially fighting for the championship, right? So it's not like a huge, they've never been here. They were completely outclassed and they lost everything because they didn't, they forgot to, set their keyboards, right? It's not something like that. It's the little things, like, hey, you're in a high pressure scenario, and a play that they run, or maybe a shot that they hit 10 out of 10 times during the regular season is off. A point where they're on the, when they're on the a spot on the map where they're on the point 10 out of 10 times during the regular season, maybe they're off, and that's enough to flip it. And again, when you're losing by razor thin margins, literally 3-2 both of their games, I mean, yes, you can look at it specifically and say that maybe some of the coaching decisions were off, but I would not discount the fact that it's like, hey, this is their first time at this level of pressure, and it was only little things that threw them off. So, I mean, I think, Shanghai still amazing performance, and going to be a fantastic team. I mean, at least as we would imagine them looking at next season. A lot of the teams are kind of cleaning house right now, but I mean, a really good performance on the season, and looking to potentially be a pretty big contender moving forward. But yeah, I think
I think they're
things.
Uniquely suited. I mean, to just touch back on Philly, like, there's changes I would recommend Philly make to their roster.
Right.
I don't know that that's really the case here with Shanghai.
Yeah.
I think they could potentially move some pieces, right? Like, if you have a player like Lip and you have a full season in front of you, and you think he's pretty close to DM and Widow in your mind, and your coaches can work with him, can get him up to snuff on it. I think they can maybe move some pieces and change some things around. But as far as their core, their team goes, I think you're keeping Fearless. I think you're keeping Void. I think you're keeping your back line. You can maybe try to upgrade from Izzyaki, but again, I wouldn't lose him, because I think his Zenyatta play is so good and so mechanically strong that you want to have him around for when the meta suits him. But maybe you want the 2 good flex support situation that San Francisco has shown since they signed Twilight there. So yeah, they're definitely in I think a solid spot, and it just didn't come together for them this time. I really do tend to agree with that, but I was still a little let down, right? Like I really wanted that San Francisco versus Shanghai final, and after it went to 5 the first time, it really felt like we were about to get it, and then it just I was just a little disappointed, but
Yeah.
not in their performance and in the way I was with Philly. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't, they acquitted themselves well. They showed up, they put on a show. They didn't fall flat. It just didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's razor thin. It's just little things, but yeah, certainly not the performance that a Shanghai fan wanted going in to this event, but overall a good performance. I mean, Death. We've touched on it in a lot of the other subjects, but maybe just to bring it all together. I mean, San Francisco back to back, the 2-time. Really, I mean, not the 2-time. I think dominant in the sense that I mean, you can't go back to back world championships without being a dominant force, but not necessarily like they didn't 3-0 the whole thing like they did to Vancouver in the finals.
Yeah, San Francisco, it's they just get it.
Yeah.
They just mentally, scouting, coaching, top down, they are the gold standard model of what an Overwatch League team should be, and how they should act, how they should perform, everything about it, down to the swagger, the
Yeah.
arrogance, the all that stuff that comes with winning, that you earn the right to
Right.
do when you win, their ability to recognize weaknesses. And there's one thing I can really criticize on this team, two things I can think to criticize, one on the season and then one on the weekend. And it didn't matter because they're so well coached, they were so well prepared that they were able to overcome it. But I thought getting rid of Architect opened up a serious gap in their hero pools on DPS. We've talked about it before. It wasn't relevant to this weekend, so we're not going to go deep into it or really mention it more than that. The other thing I didn't really care for was their composition plan didn't change throughout the weekend, but it was Smurf against the Soul Dynasty the whole time. I'm double check. Havana Super came in, and he played one map in the first match. And so if your hero pools aren't changing, then why are you swapping your main tanks? That's one thing I really didn't get. And it's not a question you have to answer when you
win.
So it's just a curiosity, something that I'm going to wonder about personally. And I also think it signals a roster change that's going to happen for this team. They're not coming in the next season with both of these players.
No problem.
The value of Smurf and Super are too high.
Yeah.
They can make up too much money. They can acquire too much talent in other positions or spots by letting one of these players go. So I fully expect them to do that. Now, next week, we're going to catch up on all the free agent stuff we're missing and that we haven't talked about over the last 2 weeks. There was a Reddit comment from John Spector saying they're going to put out that roster contract status blog post next week. We're also recording late next week, so fingers crossed we have that information by the time we record, and then we'll just do a free agency.
I mean, we might as well just plan the episode around that, because it's, if we're going to do the free agency.
If it's later in the week, we might record late in the week or something. No, it's the off season. We can record and do whatever we
record
want.
whenever we want.
So keep an eye out for that. Feel free to ask us in Discord if you're looking for it, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be some changes there, but I mean, how much more can I say nice about this man? But I thought Choi Hyobin was just the reason that they're so dominant yet again when I watch them play. It's constant. His ability to perform on whatever the off tank is, whatever they need from him. He's top 3 on all of them. It was Diva in the regular postseason, and then it was Sigma this time around. And he just is so consistently incredible for this team. I talk about him like the glue that holds it all together, and that's what I saw again this past time around. I also thought Stryker was I mean, he was the Grand Finals MVP, so that in and of itself speaks to how great of a performance he had. But yeah, I mean, top down, the whole roster performed great. I thought Violet should have been in consideration for that. Like, it was like Choi, Violet, and Stryker. If San Francisco won were the 3, I would have been completely fine with getting that award. So yeah, they were just they were great, and you even got to see a player like On step in, and you didn't know that he would have that kind of clutch stage performance, and there was maybe a drop off. If I'm being honest, I think there was maybe a drop off in what we saw from Ons in the regular season versus what we saw from him here. And part of that is, again, the same thing what happened with Sato, right? Where you're now on this stage and this weekend, it's you against the best 100% of the time. So how do you look as dominant as when you get to play against bad teams in the regular season? It makes a lot of sense, but he by no means was a liability or a problem. I thought he performed very well. Just another shout out to the coaching staff. Like, we can't speak more positively about Coach Krusty than we do, given every opportunity to do so. And I think he, alongside Choi Ho-bin, just make everything work for this team. And just, he keeps the train running on time, everybody on schedule, everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing. Nobody's out of position when they're playing. Everybody knows the plan. They're just so prepared. They're so ready for every single opponent. And even when they're not, even when they fall behind, they get it figured out. He's able to communicate the adjustments he wants the team to make in whatever the limitations are. It's still not 100% clear to me when the coaches can talk to him and when they can't. But I think, like, even in between maps, they have like some amount of time where they can hop on the call or something. So yeah, I mean, they're just absolutely 100% what every team should be modeling themselves to be. And it's start with the coaching staff, get that right, get the right coach there, and then let them build the roster they want, and let them give them the reins to drive the organization. And that's when you find the players like Ons that can come in and contribute. That's when you can trade for strikers and things like that they need to do. I mean, so many of these pieces were acquired by Krusty after he got there that it's his fingerprints are all over everything they do. And you can't mention the 2-timers without starting the conversation with the coaching staff. So big congratulations to them. Great to see. I'm glad they're the team that I chose randomly, flipping a coin last season, going into the grand finals to paint my face and go nuts for. Because they're really paying that back with interest over these 2 years. So it's great to see. And I mean, spoiler for next week, but like Moth posted LFT, and who knows how long this is gonna last and how long they can keep it together. But they were able to do it for 2 years, and that's really, really difficult. The back-to-back thing, when you've got a target on your back against every opponent, everybody gives you their best because they want to be able to say they upset the San Francisco Shock and they got that win. And a win against them really validates you and your storyline, your narratives, your arcs that you're improving, everything you're trying to sell. When you beat the defending champions, you really justify that in most people's minds, and you always get everybody's best. So to be able to repeat, especially in a team game like this, when it's not just a matter of like, I'm mechanically the best, right? Because when one player dominates in Smash Brothers or any 1v1 game, maybe they're just better. Right. Maybe it's just that they understand it better.
Right.
And this isn't that. Maybe they are, and they do, but there's so many other factors that go into
it. Doesn't feel that way,
like
if
Overwatch.
anything.
Right. You know, that it really just speaks to the quality of the coaching, and can't possibly give enough accolades and praise to that organization, that coaching staff, and that roster. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, huge congratulations. Yeah. Huge congratulations to the San Francisco Shock. I'm sure the what was it, like $1.7 million check that they're going to get cut is also a pretty good congratulations as well. But DB, that's 2020 for you. We did not think that. Did you think we were going to be here when the season started? I don't think anyone did. But we're here.
Is in watching it at home.
Right.
Watching, all that. Seeing San Francisco win again. Yeah.
I mean, sure.
They were the preseason favorites. Yeah. Would have thought we were there. We touched briefly on it in the other conversations, but we're not going to go too deep into Seoul's Cinderella run here. But greatest player of all time in Overwatch League. Who do you got?
Greatest player of all time?
Who's the GOAT?
Oh, the GOAT? It's got to be Prophet. He's number one in everything, basically.
Who's the most clutch player of all time?
I mean, I would say Carpe, but you can't be clutch when he's not in the game.
Yeah, when you're benched, you're not clutch.
What's
to me,
the
it's
answer?
Gesture. It's Gesture.
Oh, yeah.
Like the man's 2 postseason runs, he looked like he was head and shoulders the best player on the server at all times. Like, I don't want to diminish how good Prophet looked this weekend, but by comparison to Gesture, to me, it wasn't particularly.
I mean, it was the same
close.
season 1 as well.
It really was. I thought Gesture should have gotten the MVP for the postseason as well. He just didn't have like the flashy play and like the deciding match to maybe push it over the edge. But man, when you talk about like the difference between somebody like Sato, who looks so good through the regular season and then doesn't have what it takes when you get into the, like, who would you rather have? Like, there's so many people would say Sato over Gesture. To me, it's like,
really
no brain. It has to be the case. I mean, they might all be Philly fans. I don't know, but it is insane to me that would even be like questioned.
That's even a question.
Yeah, would question it. Gesture should be considered like if he hits the free agent market, he should be considered the best possible pickup at the position. I don't care who else becomes available.
Right.
I don't care what the stats say, regular season numbers, throw it all out, because this man can take a 500 record team and turn them into finalist participants. And he just could not have impressed me more, even if they'd actually won the event. Like it just felt like he did everything possible from his spot to give his team that W, and it just didn't work out. Also, props. I thought Fitz was out of his mind, the best we've ever seen him this weekend as well. So I'm very curious to see what Seoul does. 12-12, or I think that was the record. 500 win record or win percentage in the regular season isn't something you rest on, but I think there's very clearly something there for Seoul as well. That they have the right pieces to build around now. I'm very curious to see what they do with their roster going into the next year, because they could very easily ascend into that tier 1 category with what they have. If they can just get the rest of it together, and maybe not even like they did this year. I mean, they maybe got a little lucky with a meta that let Gesture play Roadhog and just be the best player in the weekend or whatever. But maybe they're right not to worry too much about the regular season record and just have the players that are good in this moment. But they were like in a regular season with playoff cutoffs instead of everybody makes it in, right?
Right. I was going to say, if you don't make it to the playoffs, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I don't know. They're going to be a very interesting one to watch throughout the off season. Maybe one of the most entertaining of the teams that isn't going to fire everyone and start over again.
Right. So. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, it's really good because we've seen Seoul has shot themselves in the foot traditionally as an organization time and time again during the regular season. And yes, they did have the unique opportunity to just turn it up for the playoffs and the grand finals, but like if you're not there, it doesn't matter. So very interesting to see. But Death, this is the end of the 2020 season. We're moving into the off season, but it has been a banger considering all that has happened with COVID and the changes and all that stuff. I mean, yes, it was rough at times, and I gotta say, hats off, even though I'm literally not going to take my hat off. Hats off to the league. Hats off to the teams and everyone that participated. Hats off to you as the listeners and fans who tuned in and stuck through it in this crazy time. Because, I mean, they could have shut it down. They could have, done what a lot of traditional sports did and said, hey, we're not going to have a season. I mean, it would have been at least a somewhat reasonable. You can't really blame anyone for not wanting to put on something like this when we're in literally a global pandemic, but they did. So hats off to
0% infection rate, as far as I know, of all their players, all the staff.
Yeah.
Haven't heard of a single player getting sick or contracting it.
Yep. Which is great.
My football team's landing in Nashville to play against a team with 22 positive players.
Yep.
Tomorrow. So I'm stressing out about that, but that was a problem that, it wasn't perfect. And we said it the whole way, the whole time going into it. There was no right answer. There was a lot of wrong answers.
Yeah.
We got as close to a right answer as I think we could have. I'm really happy with the way everything played out from top to bottom. So looking forward to next year.
Yeah. So again, huge shout outs to everyone involved with the league and the teams. And again, we've been critical at all the times that I think are proper and relevant. I mean, there's no sense in sugarcoating things, but there's also no sense in bashing when credit, let's give credit where credit is due, and huge shout outs to the league for putting it on and making the best of a bad situation. But Death, that is going to be it for the 2020 season of Overwatch League. We are going to be continuing our off-season coverage. If you have any ideas for what you'd like to see, I mean, we've got some ideas for some stuff, but if you have any ideas of what you want to see, head over to the Discord, discord.me/highnoonpodcast, and let us know. You can find us everywhere. High Noon Podcast, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, all that good stuff. High Noon Podcast. But, Death, where can people find you when you're not here and not in the Discord?
I'm probably doing football stuff lately. You can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/deathblowttv. That's also the Twitch. I've been making Buffalo Bills specific YouTube stuff for a little while now, so I'm really not streaming very much, but I don't think I can make a video this week with us playing on Tuesday, so maybe I get something in this week. I don't know. It's that on Twitch too, DeathblowTTV. Follow me there. And then, let's be honest, I'm always on Discord. You'll never see my icon look like I'm online.
Right. But you're always there.
And there's times I'm sleeping. But my response time there. If you need me, Discord.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at @the_Blevins. But that is going to be it. Thank you, everyone, again, for listening and supporting us during the season. But for Deathblow, I'm Blevins. And remember, the last time in the 2020 Overwatch League season, it's happening.